Watch out for. These two weasels have actually turned into white weasels after crossing the warm winter boundary line. This little yellow rabbit stops as soon as he sees it. Just looking at the cold winter forest makes him shiver. The other bunnies rushed over happily. They jumped happily into the east woods. They all turned into white rabbits. The little yellow rabbit next to us is excited to try. He runs happily over to them, but he doesn't jump over in a hurry. Instead, he tries his ears out first. The little ears turn white instantly, and then he pushed his nose up. It was amazing. He also colored his tail in a naughty way. He showed off in front of Tinker Bell. Then he jumped into the winter forest and disappeared into the snow. The sun was shining on one side. On the other hand, the snow was flying. Tinker Bell was curious about the world of ice and snow, so she jumped with him. It was the first time in her life she had ever felt snow and ice. Looking at the snowflakes in the sky, Tinker Bell was so happy. The winter woods were so beautiful. And just then, a miraculous sight happened. The wings on her back glowed with color. She couldn't believe her eyes. Just as she was lost in it, suddenly she was pulled back into the warm woods by the warm fairy with a rope. Because the warm fairy could not enter the winter forest, Tinker Bell's wings would have froze if she hadn't been there a moment later. The animal fairies rushed to get her to a doctor. Luckily, they were able to get her back in time. Tinker Bell's wings were fine. She told her friends about the glowing wings, but they didn't believe her. They said it was probably just a reflection of the snow and ice. Tinker Bell was not satisfied. She decided to go back to the east woods to find out what was going on. She put on her homemade winter coat, and on the way out, she put 2 little cotton balls on her shoes. She climbs into the basket of goods destined for the east woods. It just so happens that the bamboo basket is carried by a training owl. The journey was rocking and swaying. He almost threw Tinker Bell off. When he reached his destination, he dropped the basket hard on the ice. Tinker Bell made it to the library without incident. As she entered, her wings glowed with color again, but to her surprise, the wings of another fairy in the room were also glowing. They looked at each other. They looked at each other curiously. The caretaker was amazed. He had never seen such a phenomenon before. In order to find out the reason for the glowing wings, the keeper made them stand on a huge snowflake. Then the crutches fell to the ground. The snowflake lifted them into the air.
Your wings into the light.
They touched their spread wings together. They glowed brightly. The ice wall reveals their upbringing. They are twin sisters. Before the dandelion became a fairy, one stayed in the winter forest. The other drifted down with the wind in the warm forest. Since then they have been separated from each other. But every time they came close, the wings will glow with a sense of light. That's why the wings glow. The mystery of the wings is finally solved. Sister takes Tinker Bell to learn how to skate in the east woods. Watching the winter fairies make snowflakes live. Whenever there's something fun to do in the winter woods, Sister took Tinker Bell to do it all. But Tinker Bell can't stay in the east woods for long. She was sad to leave her sister. When she left, she told her sister that she would definitely show her the warm woods. When she returned, Tinker Bell, with the help of her friends, Tinker Bell built a big snowmaking machine. She was ready to take her sister to the warm forest. Have you ever seen such a beautiful natural spectacle? Snow falling on one side and the sun shining on the other. This extreme weather has kept the twin sisters apart. Even so, Tinker Bell, the Tinker Fairy, was not deterred. She and her friends have built a snowmaking machine. Her sister asked her friend to bring in a large block of ice. After a bit of tinkering by her friends, she actually made snowflakes. Sister crossed the border. She made it to the warm forest. She had never seen such a colorful world before. She was curious about everything around her. Tinker Bell's sisters had an elaborate surprise in store for her. The water fairies pull up the water droplets and make the fish hover in front of her. The light fairies painted a beautiful rainbow. The flower fairy brings flowers to bloom wherever she flies. The animal fairies bring in countless butterflies. The flower fairy comes forward to present a flower to make the flower last forever. Sister wrapped the flower in frost. But just then, she began to wipe her sweat. Then she fell weakly to the ground. Her wings began to melt and she couldn't fly. Tinker Bell rushed to take her to the winter woods. The king of the winter woods came along. The king guided her and she spread her wings. Luckily, her wings were unharmed. The king ordered her not to enter the warm forest again. At that moment, the queen also arrived and told Tinker Bell she had made the rules. The two sisters parted again with reluctance. The king kicked the snow machine over on his way out and rode off on his owl. When they returned, the queen and the king told the sisters the same story. Once upon a time, two elves met and fell in love. One was a winter spirit. The other was a warm spirit. They crossed the line in spite of the danger. As a result, the winter elf's wings were destroyed, never to be repaired. From then on, the queen decreed that the elves must never cross the line again. They could only love each other silently in their hearts. But just then, the snow machine had changed the climate of the warm woods. woods. A huge cold wave was slowly sweeping through the warm forest. A sudden cold spell sweeps through the warm forest. The warm forest is facing a huge crisis, and the culprit is a snowmaking machine. The machine has fallen into a river of ice. It's making a steady stream of snowflakes for the warm woods. Thanks to the efforts of Tinker Bell and the fairies, they pushed the machine down the river. But the crisis is not over. The balance of the seasons has been upset. The cold front continues to spread into the warm forest. If this continues, the whole warm forest will freeze over. All the plants will freeze to death. They must race against the cold to protect the pixie dust tree, which allows them to fly. Once the tree is frozen, then all the fairies will be unable to fly. Tinker Bell is trying to save the warm woods. Tinker Bell went to the East Woods for help, despite the danger. She took out the frozen flowers. When her sister saw that the flowers were still as bright as ever, she instantly understood what Tinker Bell meant. The winter fairy's frost is like a blanket. It could protect against the cold outside. Just as the queen was at her wit's end, Tinker Bell brought a few winter fairies to
Queen Clarion! They can help. Our frost. It covers like a blanket. It can protect the tree.
Do it.
The fairies scrambled to protect the pixie dust tree. Everywhere they went, the pixie dust tree was covered in frost. But the cold stream is too fast. They can't cover it with just a few of them. Just as they were about to give up, the king comes to their aid with the eastern fairies. Hope was restored. They divide into two groups to protect the first Chan trees. The other protects the plants of the warm forest. The owls brought more winter fairies. They raced against the cold. Everywhere they go, they are covered in frost. Soon all the warm woods were wrapped up. Then the king told the warm fairies to hide in a hole in the tree. He led the winter fairies to the outer fortress to protect them. The cold front soon froze the warm woods completely. The fairies could only wait for their fate to take its course. The next day, a ray of sunlight shone through. The fairies emerged from their hiding places. In the sunlight, the ice began to melt. The fairy dust tree began to release a huge amount of fine dust. With unity and wisdom, they have overcome the crisis. All of the fairies were overwhelmed with the joy of victory. Only Tinker Bell remained silent on the ground. It turned out that she had gotten frostbite on her wings when she went to the winter woods for help. All the fairies were sad for Tinker Bell. Her sister came up to hug and comfort her. The sun was getting stronger and stronger overhead. The East fairies had to return to the winter woods. The two sisters said their goodbyes with reluctance.
Sisters. Sisters. Jingles!
After the two sisters' wings touched, Tinker Bell's wings are actually repaired a little. The two of them pressed their wings together again. Once again, a miracle happened. Tinker Bell's wings were restored. After this experience, the fairy warmers no longer had to worry about their wings freezing. The boundary rule was lifted by the queen. They were free to play in the winter woods. And in the story, the man who destroyed his wings for love was the king of the winter woods. Now he's finally reunited with the queen.